We know that previous administrations did a cross-benefit analysis on whether to assassinate Soleimani, and their assessment was that he wasn't worth the trouble. That has been the assessment of the Israelis and other allies, as we've learned. Many have wanted the opportunity to take him out and known he is a malicious actor. So what made this different, that it didn't require?
For years, the United States and its allies debated whether eliminating Qasem Soleimani was worth the potential consequences. He was well known as the architect of Iran's proxy warfare strategy, directing militant groups and coordinating attacks far beyond Iran's borders. However, previous administrations decided that striking him could ignite a large-scale regional war, leading to instability that might be impossible to control. Israel and other U.S. partners understood his influence, but also feared the domino effect that might follow his removal. Their conclusion was that the threat he posed was severe but contained, until his direct involvement in escalating attacks became impossible to ignore. Over time, the situation shifted from Soleimani is dangerous to Soleimani is actively preparing and approving attacks on Americans. That change is what eventually led to action. The decision didn't appear suddenly. It developed over years of intelligence and consequences.
First of all, Ilhan is wrong. Obviously, the State Department corrected.
This context matters when evaluating recent political debates, especially after Representative Ilhan Omar posted her claim that Iran hasn't attacked Americans. The statement immediately drew widespread backlash because it contradicted decades of documented attacks involving Iran or its proxy forces. The internet reacted instantly, with people calling out the historical inaccuracies. But instead of a chaotic exchange, Congressman Byron Donalds stepped in with a clear, fact-based response that quickly gained attention. It wasn't emotional, it was informational. Donalds laid out the reality plainly, and in doing so, turned the situation into a broader discussion about truth, accountability, and national security. His rebuttal wasn't just about refuting Omar's tweet, it was about establishing facts before political narratives distort them.
We know that Iran, through their proxies, have doled out death to Americans. We also know that there is no way that Hamas would have attacked Israel, in which, yes, there were Americans who were either killed or taken hostage without Iran approving that attack. That's just a fact. And so for my colleague to make a statement like that is just completely ignorant. And so, look, at this point, Israel is the one that is carrying out these airstrikes against Iran. A nuclear Iran is something the entire region does not want to see. Obviously, Israel doesn't want to see that, but many other countries in that region don't want to see it as well. And so to make these kind of statements to me is just pure ignorance. And frankly, it defiles the members of our country who have been killed by Iranian proxies or by direct Iranian attacks over the years.
When Byron Donalds was interviewed about the issue, he explained that Iran has consistently targeted Americans both directly and through proxy groups it funds and commands. Hamas, Hezbollah, Kataib Hezbollah, the Houthis, and others operate with training, weapons, and approval from Iran's leadership. Donalds emphasized that the October attacks on Israel, which involved Americans being killed and taken hostage, would not have taken place without Iran authorizing them. These groups do not move independently. Their strategies and timing are aligned with Iran's regional goals. He emphasized that denying Iran's role in American casualties is not a matter of opinion, it is ignoring battlefield evidence and intelligence reports. His tone was not just corrective, it was protective of American service members, and Donalds also referenced a 2022 case where families of Americans killed in Afghanistan won a court ruling holding Iran responsible for funding and supporting terrorist cells that carried out attacks against U.S. troops. The ruling accounted for the deaths and injuries of dozens of American military personnel. According to Pentagon records, more than 750 U.S. service members have died since the post-9/11 conflicts due to Iranian-backed militia operations. These are not hypothetical deaths. They are real people, with names, families, and legacies. To say Iran has never attacked Americans dismisses those sacrifices, erases their memory, and ignores legal, military, and historical documentation. Donalds highlighted that this is not just about politics, it is about truth and respect.
Family members and victims from Iran's attacks won a case against Iran, holding the regime accountable because of its support for terror actors who killed or injured 30 U.S. personnel in Afghanistan. We should point out more than 7,050 U.S. service members have died since 9/11 in war zones in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the Middle East. Many of them at the hands of Iran. Let's get your reaction to this. Let's go to the co-host of ABC's The View, basically attacking what Israel is trying to do in its fight for...
Discussion expanded further when hosts on The View suggested that Israel acted preemptively in striking Iran and that the reaction would be different if another country targeted the United States first. This framing left out critical context. Iran has repeatedly announced its intention to destroy Israel entirely. Iranian leadership has not hidden this goal, softened its language, or suggested it is symbolic rhetoric. They have expressed, encouraged, and funded movements dedicated to Israel's elimination. When an adversary says they intend to destroy you and actively arms groups working toward that goal, waiting for the threat to mature is not strategy, it is surrender. Donalds emphasized that acknowledging an enemy's stated intention, pointed out that Iran's push for nuclear capabilities is not speculation. It is openly documented and monitored by global intelligence agencies. The concern is not just nuclear power, it is nuclear weapons paired with ballistic missile delivery systems. A nuclear-armed Iran would shift power balances across the region and place Israel under immediate existential threat. It would also endanger U.S. strategic positions, bases, and allies. This is not a future problem, it is a current one. Donalds highlighted that Israel has warned consistently for years. The world listened, debated, and postponed action. Eventually, Israel reached the point where waiting meant accepting irreversible danger. 7. This is where the difference between the Iraq WMD debate and Iran's nuclear progression becomes important.
Bible, watch this.
Well, that's what I think is very problematic, because what people aren't talking about is that Israel preemptively struck Iran. And so I think the conversation would be very different if another country preemptively sent missiles to this country, right? No one would be saying, this is fine with... Sure.
Because I think that the Iranians and the Israelis believe that Iran would like to completely destroy Israel. That Iran is an actual existential threat to Israel.
But that does
so
not...
So they're saying, if you're trying to kill us, we want a nuclear bomb. And we don't want you to have a nuke.
That is fine, but you have to do that legally and under international criminal law.
Iran's launched tons of missiles.
Evidence was debated and later criticized. With Iran, the evidence is not debated. It is acknowledged across multiple nations, security agencies, and international watchdog organizations. Iran has enriched uranium beyond peaceful use thresholds. They have developed delivery systems suited for warheads. The only missing step is final assembly and authorization. Israel acted because the threat was no longer theoretical, it was imminent. Donalds emphasized that waiting longer would have... Turning to Ilhan Omar's statement, the concern is not simply that she was wrong. The concern is what such rhetoric signals to adversary nations. Words from elected officials matter. When a U.S. representative downplays or denies attacks on Americans, it can be interpreted as weakness, hesitation, or political division. Adversaries like Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas study U.S. political messaging closely. They look for signs of hesitation or confusion. So when statements distort reality, they do not just misinform the public, they potentially embolden aggressive regimes. That is why this moment matters beyond Twitter. 9. For families of fallen service members, Donald's response represented more than political disagreement. It represented recognition. When someone claims Iran has no American blood on its hands, it dismisses the grief and sacrifice of spouses, children, and parents who live with the consequences of service-related loss. National security is not just strategy, it is personal. It is human. The debate is not about abstract geopolitics, it is about real lives impacted by real violence. Donald's rebuttal grounded the conversation in that reality.
To that, Congressman.
I mean, look, first of all, I would say at least at some point there was some semblance of reality on The View. The truth is that Iran backed Hamas, they backed Hezbollah. Hamas would not have attacked the Israelis without Iranian approval. That is a fact. Number two, the Iranian regime has called for the complete death of Israel. They've called for it multiple times. So at some point, are you going to believe your enemies and what their true intents are? A nuclear Iran is not in the interest of Israel. It's not in the interest of the region. And I would add, it's not in the interest of the United States. So at this point, for Israel to take action, what other choice did they have? Were they really going to sit there and watch the Iranians get nuclear weapons with ballistic missile capabilities and then sit back and do what? Negotiate at the table year after year after year, basically at the butt of the gun? Israel wasn't going to do that. They've been warning about this for years. This is not something new. And so once it became clear that Iran was close to actually having nuclear weapons, then they decided to act. And let me also bring this other argument up because this one is happening in the United States. This is very different from the WMD conversation with Iraq back in the early 2000s. There was skepticism about WMDs in Iraq. We could always go back down that history. There is no dispute about the Iranians trying to get a nuclear weapons system. No dispute whatsoever.
Congressman Byron Donalds, always a pleasure and wonderful to have you back on the show. It's great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
So now the broader question emerges. Should elected officials be held accountable when they publicly misstate facts that involve national security and documented American casualties? Accountability does not always mean political punishment, but it does mean truth must come before narrative. Because when narratives replace truth, policy becomes reckless. And reckless policy invites danger. If you made it this far, you're clearly someone who values honesty in geopolitical discussion. Stay engaged, stay informed, and continue paying attention, because what happens in these conversations directly shapes the world we live in.